Hi, I'm Howard Wong, co-creator of Reponaut, and this is True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Howard Wong about making the comic book series Reponaut. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Based in Toronto, Ontario, Howard Wong has worked with industry leaders such as Bandai Namco, Bungie Inc, Marvel Comics, National Geographic, and Threezero. Currently, he's working on several exciting projects including client work in animation, comics, and new media development, as well as developing creator-owned IPs including a young adult graphic novel, horror series, and interactive narrative experience. His current comic series with co-creator Keith Grachow is Reponaut. Reponaut is a new comic miniseries that tells a tale of a family drama set in space with lots of humor, horror, and action. The family is led by Rennx, a father struggling to keep his life on track, who finally gets the big repo job that could be a new start. So without further ado, here's my chat with Howard Wong about making the comic book series Reponaut. So Howard Wong, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, John.
No, this is great. We haven't spoken in an interview for a long time, although we have caught up recently. But before I go with all the questions, I would like to know, what are you reading today?
I have put a pause because I'm working on a few projects, so reading has gone to the side. I've become the very thing that I told my kids not to be, which is watching TV a lot. So for television watching, I've been watching two things. One is a lot of anime, like a lot, from Free Ren, Jujutsu Kaisen. I guess because a lot of things are the second season and so forth are popping up around this time, as well as a lot of K-drama, which is kind of odd to say that it's kind of filling that void of me not having time to read, and I can sort of work in between. It sounds gonna sound weird, but yeah, what am I watching actually? In K-drama, I watched too many, from Taxi Driver all the way to The Art of Sarah Kim, which is that one's pretty good. I haven't finished that one yet, but that's an excellent one because it's based on a real crime that happened in South Korea. I don't want to spoil it, but it's once you look it up and what's it evolving, it's really interesting and fascinating, especially the actual crime itself.
Good stuff. Well, lots of narratives. I mean, no matter what the medium is, as long as the narrative grips you and fascinates you and you want to continue with it, I guess that's all that matters.
Yeah, I think they go in bouts, though, to be honest. Like, sometimes I read and not watch anything, or in this case, it goes in waves, and then sometimes I watch stuff and then not read for a bit, well, especially when I'm busy writing or working. So, yeah, I finally realized that, how weird that is, because I know when I'm really busy, when I don't have time to read.
Cool. Well, we recently met up at the Toronto Comic Con. So I want to ask you, how was that event for you?
Oh, that was great. It was one of those events I look forward to because there's a lot of local creators. It sounds awful, but a lot of times only see during the shows just because of distance and what have you. So it's great to catch up with everyone all at once and then meeting new folks as well. I think it's weird when you recognize people's physical parents but never met them, and then go to a random dinner and then you end up meeting them there, and then you learn about them, you learn about you, and sort of like become new friends and stuff. So that was great, meeting fans, new and old. I always like the ones that follow my old work and then ask me questions about when certain things are coming out. And we are working on stuff. Folks who've been waiting for the second part of Denver's Children have been bugging me, Josh, for quite some time now, but it is being arted up. So things like that was great conversations. I think my favorite thing actually that happened at the con was somebody bringing me to sign a variant cover of Iron Man Hong Kong Heroes that I've never seen in real life, like
Wow,
ever. And
really?
it was such a bizarre, and there's more to it too, because I was seeing this person come by and trying to, let them know about my new book with Keith. And then before I even got past the title, he flirts out, "I know who you are," which is I'll tell you, anyone in the club, like, please don't do that to us because we see a lot of folks. We may remember it, we will. But if we can't, it's not because we don't like you, it's just because we see so many people. So my brain was racking right there, going, oh no, who is this? And it turned out to be my eldest daughter's dungeon master.
Oh,
Which
wow.
I never met him. I never met him ever in real life. So I just know about him through her. So I was like, oh, good. So it's not me. He's the one who whipped out variant cover, which is the one with Stan Lee on it in an Iron Man suit. So that was
Oh,
the first
right.
time I ever signed one of those. It was just so bizarre 'cause I haven't seen it for so long. And then him sharing the story of him getting the shipment of all the books he was going to get signed at the show while he was DMing a game while my daughter was there, and then whipped that out because well, the character I created was based on her, so she then burst her without me being there, which is kind of funny and kind of a dad moment without me being there. Personally.
That's pretty cool. It's really neat.
Oh,
Now, you
yeah.
just mentioned the title with Keith called Reponaut, your miniseries that you're working on right now. What if you could talk a little bit about the story? What is it all about?
Oh, Reponaut. Wow. So Reponaut is an absurd sci-fi horror comedy which follows our main character who's basically his life has knocked him down repeatedly and then sat on him. So he's like in massive debt, family's estranged, and his job is basically a freelance repo agent. So it's in a far future where he's repossessing people's spaceships to whatever pays the bills. So he finally gets a tip off on the white whale of repo, a serious criminal ship. As he goes out there, things happen and things get weird, partially because of his janky hacked gear to what he will find on the ship. And then things get worse from there because the whole world is descending upon this one repo because everybody wants to get it for one reason or another, and he's there in the middle of it. So we'll see how he does. He get out? Does he get what he wants, or does he get something else that's much much worse? But we'll
Mm.
find out. I know a lot of people ask, "Is book one does that mean it's a trade?" And because it's so big, it's like 48 pages long. It's not a trade. It's the first issue, which is definitely not typical for a miniseries, but we just turn out to this way because of the process and the way we develop the story. Because traditionally, you plan out 5 issue, 20 pages each and stuff. We didn't do it with this one. For whatever reason, this became more natural, organic in a way, how we got to this. I know I deviated from the question of what's it about, but it is definitely not for kids. It's for, I guess, teens and adults would be the aim for this. If you're into manga, if you're into weird, creepy sci-fi stuff with really dark humor and grungy characters, this is definitely something to check out.
Right. Now, you just hinted about the creative process not being typical. Wonder if you could explain that, maybe go into a little more detail about how you and Keith put it all together.
So the typical comic book would be idea, plot, story breakdown, script, then to artist to thumbnail, back to writer and artist to make sure that there's no changes needed before we go to art, and then letter it up with all the dialogue and captions, etc. So I just couldn't script this thing. I got from idea to plot to story breakdown, but I had a lot of false starts scripting this. I even tried scripting it as a film script just to see if that would help with the flow, but it just felt like I wouldn't say the word work, but it felt like it was hindering the fun I was supposed to have with this. So I was talking to Keith about it and asked him to take a look because I thought maybe it's my story breakdown. Maybe I mucked up something. I just don't realize it because when you're too close to something, you don't see something or error, things that can be changed. So as we were doing that, we're working over a Google Doc Live, and then we just bouncing back and forth. And he basically suggested why don't he just thumbnail a bunch of pages and see if that helps. And then at the end of the day, it became why don't you just draw it and I'll figure out the dialogue later from there. So we were like going back and forth as he was drawing it, and when it came down to lettering it, figuring out what dialogue it was. I thought about doing that ahead of time, which is more typical, but it didn't happen. So all the dialogue and captions and what have you in the first issue here was literally done as I was lettering. Don't do that. By the way, if you're doing a comic book for the first time, don't do that. I just felt it easier for me to do it this way, just because of what we're doing. So What we didn't realize was along the way, we found out that this was it the Marvel way? Not quite. And it wasn't like the traditional way, obviously. So it's almost like what I would say, like playing jazz when somebody plays a couple bars or chords of something and somebody adds on to something and you just play off each other. So what I didn't realize it reminded me during Comic Con when I was having conversations with folks. It's almost like how you make a comic book when you were a kid, when you don't know anything about formats and structures or what have you, and you just attack it all at the same time as a group. So that's why it became very fun to do. It's not easy, definitely not easy to do, but it was hilariously fun because everything kept on changing. Everything was on the fly, I guess I would say. Like even the cover, Keith has some great design cover ideas, and I suggested to grab something from one of the panels because to me it looked like it looked great as a cover. Not to say he wasted his time. You'll see them in books 2, 3, and so forth. But that kind of thing happened the day before it went to the printers. I made a suggestion of changing the color of the logo, and Keith was kind of upset about it because it's the day before it's going to hit print. So I mean the file's already at the printers, but then he's like, "Fine, let me see what I can do," and then he changed it, and it looked better. So we were like literally right down to the line making adjustments and changes, which you do in the typical process, but in this one, it was more of not having a laid out plan, which is, if that makes sense. And even though we had like a story breakdown, we kind of deviated from that when we started doing our thing. When he was doing the art and then finalizing the art, kind of deviated the story breakdown's flow. When I did the dialogue, I did the same thing. we shifted and changed the progress of the story, which made it better, actually. Which is kind of weird to say that by doing something traditionally for so long and then going, you know what, if we do it as kids, it might be better. But for this project, it did. It was one of those things where we both wanted to have fun. We didn't want to feel like it's work. We done the traditional stuff. There was no intention to do it differently. It was just happened to be naturally, all because I was stuck in a rut of scripting, which is kind of funny because I was scripting other things easily, except for this one.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to say at the outset that it felt like jazz. And although you say you employ, can I put in quotation marks, air quotes, kid-like creative process, because both you and Keith are pros, you have all this experience, just like a jazz player has. You know what works and what doesn't work, so you can riff off each other, and you have no worries about something going wrong. It's great to put fun back in the making of comic books. I think that's a great idea. Super.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I've known Keith for very, very long, actually, probably close to 2 decades, if not more. So he's used to my weirdness of sometimes I write in the script certain things that some people might not understand, and I would have to explain a bit more. But he'd be like, "Okay," and they would just do that. And I mean, when I write some stuff or some like, "Hey, Keith, I have this idea for this," I don't have to explain too much, and I know that he'll do something with it roughly. Like I have a pretty good idea what he'll do with it, but then sometimes he surprises me, and sometimes I surprise him. But within not within the oh what did you do to my thing is more of oh yeah I never thought of it seeing it from this angle or this perspective of things. So yeah, it's sort of when you work with somebody long enough you kind of anticipate, and then when you're surprised it's not like a bad surprise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been talking about Reponaut. I've got to ask you then, what other projects do you have in the go that you can talk about?
I have a one shot that will be coming out of Marcosia. I don't know when yet, actually, but that's another horror story with samurai and zombies. That I can't talk too much about it because it's not out yet, but it was done and ready like pre-COVID. COVID didn't really help with a lot of production stuff, so I did that with Simon Ng, who was the artist on Damn Cursed Children. So that's actually one of the things we did before Damn Cursed Children, but for whatever reason, we didn't pitch it. We wanted to maybe either add stuff to it or fine tune it a bit. But then once we had it out pitching it to different publishers, it was like right before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then it was like backlogged to the point where we almost kind of forgot about it ourselves. So it should be coming out, I'm hoping sometime in 2026, if not early 2027. The other thing I'm working on is PandaCon. So the reboot that's happening with PandaCon. If anyone's not familiar with PandaCon, if you look up the 90s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the toy line, it had the PandaCon toy, which is based off of an indie book with the same title. But the PandaCon reboot is totally not that. It's basically rebuilt from the ground up, being pitched as an animated series, which I can't talk too much about. I'm working on the graphic novel for that and basically being an EP for the story development for the animation pitch for it. They released a toy in NECA, but that was more of a traditional based evergreen Panacon version. There was like shoes and stuff from Bull Airs that came out, I think last year or the year before. And most recently, this is a kind of weird, fun, geeky thing because a lot of people think that Panacon appeared in the 90s animated series. No, he did not. They thought he was in the TMNT comic books. He wasn't until recently. So IDW, as most people know, are running the TMNT titles. So now there's a crossover with Pandacon. So that's technically the first time they cross over in the same comic in the same universe ever, which is weird because every time we bring up Pandacon and people who are fans of it, including myself, when I first heard about him, oh, he's like the one from the cartoons. He was never in the cartoon. Really? Because it was like urban myth, and then it's just such a weird thing. Because in my head, it was definitely I saw it. I'm sure I saw it. What I didn't realize was that when they released the '90s toys from TMNT, they used the same TMT packaging. So when your brain goes, "This is what happened," but it really didn't. It was more maybe it was manifesting now that I'm helping to work on it. But it's such a weird a fact that when you talk to real fans of PandaCon, they really think that he was on the anime series and or comic books, but no, he wasn't. So it's really weird. I mean, I never got a chance to talk to Dave Garcia and Monica, who were the creators of Pandacon, about that because I'm sure they get that a lot because it's just this weird, like, even for me, like, it took me a while to go, really? And then I had to, like, Google it up. Why do I think it did? Kind of made sense that it would be in the TMNT universe because it's a panda and the flora gives it samurai, blah, blah, blah. It kind of just, fit all the right pieces for that world in TMNT.
Right.
But no,
Right.
but so I'm working on that with a bunch of other folks and can't wait to see where it goes. There's a lot of things I'm sure I can't talk about, so I'm going to make sure I don't mess up
Right.
for that one. There's another project that I'm going to be starting. It's a career-owned project that I kind of wanted to do something in this world, or I guess in this vein for the longest time. Kind of my love letter for Hong Kong cinema and Hong Kong itself. So it's going to be one of those, I guess, not 80s, 90s film love letter to the Hong Kong cinema. And then roughly around that time period as well, maybe a little bit before, just because it was one of those influential things that happened when me growing up in Canada. Like my touch point was really films, be it good or bad. I mean, everything from the gangster films to what have you. But it's such a huge influence in some of my storytelling, including like the Wong Kar-wai films. That those are like one of those things that made me think that can I never do this in comic books, and if I can it pull it off? So we'll see where that goes. Then I would be excited to see which publisher will take it on. If not, I'll self-publish it. But it's one of those like personal projects that always that you always want to do. It's like no one's going to really do this properly, so I'm going to do it myself. So
Cool.
here I am.
Well,
Yep.
we were talking about Toronto Comic Con. I wonder if you had any other events or festivals planned for this year.
No plans yet. I mean, I'm hoping to go to Fan Expo. I honestly haven't contacted anyone about Free Comic Book Day, but whereas with anything, I pop into a bunch of stores to say hang out with friends. But if anyone out there is looking for someone to put a button C for Free Comic Book Day, I I'm more than happy to talk. Workshop wise, I have something with the Richmond Hill Public Library in May for the Asia Heritage Week. It's basically a talk plus workshop would be, I guess, would be the easiest way for me to define it. where I talk about creating Asian comic book characters and how is that different from creating any other character, and hopefully help teens to adults create their own, or at least start the process of doing that. That happens May 16th. Don't quote me on that because that's on the top of my head that I'm remembering that, but it should be a fun one. It's a good library, and usually when I do these ones, I get to learn about things that I would never have thought of doing in the creative process. When people go, can I do it this way? Yeah, sure. And then I add, I'm going to keep that with me too. I think that's all the events and things I'll be involved with.
Super. Well, with everything that you have on the go today and in the future, where can people find you online?
You can find me at the Real Howard Wong on Instagram, and Linktree would probably be the easier one. linktr.ee, the Real Howard Wong.
Thanks to Howard for the chat. You can discover more about Howard Wong online at therealhowardwong.blogspot.com and on Instagram at therealhowardwong. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about making comic books and graphic novels. I encourage you to subscribe via the website so be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media platforms, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.